Hi, I'm Gregorio Fierro. I'm a professional chef and I have been for 23 years. I work as a brand ambassador for several food equipment manufacturers. We're here today experimenting with two slicers. There's not a head-to-head comparison because we have a slight advantage with the Teflon blade, or at least we think we do. This is the Espectro SLE-10T, T for Teflon rather, and this is the Globe G10. They're both 1/3 horsepower, belt driven. They're considered light duty slicers. These are generally spec'd for applications where you're working an hour to 2 hours a day on the slicer. From a face value kind of evaluation, I have to say the Globe is a bit cleaner looking. I like the rounded corners, a little easier to clean. It seems a bit heavier. The carriage is a bit heavier and a bit larger than the Espectro. The Espectro sits on a slightly smaller footprint. It's also fair to say that this Globe is roughly 3 times more than this Espectro is on the open market. So, you know, we're not expecting them to be apples to apples as far as performance, but we want to put them through their paces and see what they show us. So we're going to do a little slicing with the Espectro. And the carriage is actually very light and effortless. And despite its small size, it's actually giving pretty uniform cuts. You see those, they're nice and even. Not bad for an inexpensive slicer. So now we're working with the Globe slicer. And the carriage is very smooth. And all in all, it's giving a very uniform cut. If you look at those slices, they're actually pretty nice, considering it's a pretty small slicer. Okay, so no one would ever consider these slicers adequate for constant cheese slicing, but we wanted to put some cheese on them just to show you that if you're a caterer, you're doing small work and you occasionally need to cut cheese, that you can actually use them for cheese. The Teflon does help a little bit with the amount of drag that's created by the cheese on the slicer. It makes it a little easier to slice. Now again, this is not a cheese slicer, but it's doing a pretty good job with the cheddar. Let's take it over here and see what the Globe would do. I also like that the Espectro has that little stop, because when you're working with a small slicer with a small carriage, you're often going to run into situations where the product is going to be bigger than the carriage. And it's nice to be able to kind of lock that up and get it out of the way while you're working. The Globe carriage is definitely a little smoother. And like the Espectro, no one would ever sell this to you in all honesty as a cheese slicer. But you know what's funny is I have to give the Teflon blade a lot of credit, because even though the carriage on this Globe is smoother, once we put the cheese in here, the amount of drag that's created by the cheese is making that carriage a lot harder to push. But it is making good clean slices, and for occasional sporadic use as a cheese slicer, you could definitely use it. So now that I've experimented with these two machines, I have to give the slight edge to the Globe as far as overall quality. It's a more robust machine, it's a bit heavier. But it bears being said that on the open market, this deli slicer is roughly 3 times more expensive than this one. So I would say if you have the budget and you want something that's like a top of the line machine, that I guess the Globe is your machine. But if you're looking for an economical way to do intermittent slicing in a catering operation or a small restaurant, you know, money is important, and being able to save that much money and get essentially the same quality, to me, the difference is negligible in performance, but the difference is pretty substantial in price.